treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Hey. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you see them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I worship Your holy name. The sun comes up. It's a new day dawning. It's time to sing Your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I worship Your holy name. You're rich in love and You're slow to anger. Your name is great and was near and my time has come. Still my soul will sing your praise unending. 10,000 years and then forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I worship your holy name. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I worship your holy name. Lord, I worship your holy name.
Our passage, our lesson for today, comes from the book of Job in the Old Testament, one of my favorite books in the Bible. The story begins with a man, a good man by the name of Job, who loses everything that is dear to him. And then, no kidding, after this, he wanders out into the desert in his underwear. And he sits there for a long time trying to make sense of it all. And then the remainder of the story is a series of arguments between Job and his friends who come to visit him in the desert about why all these bad things happen to such a good man like Job. And finally, at the end of the book, God appears to show all of them that none of them understand Job's experience fully, not even Job himself. And fortunately, after this lesson is learned, God blesses Job with a new and even better life, where he now possesses the knowledge that he needed, knowing that he is not in control, but that God is. That is the book of Job in a nutshell. Now today, I'd like us to look at the part of the story where Job has gone out into the desert to think and to pray and to mourn and to try to make sense of everything. His friends, the story tells us, follow him there, and how they respond to him is where our lesson for today resides. The passage reads, "When Job's 3 friends heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with Job for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was." If only the story ended there, it would be almost perfect. I mean, look at the care and the love and the sympathy. Job's friends sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said anything. They just sat with him and helped him hold his suffering. The problem is, the story doesn't end there. In fact, it is followed by 20-some more chapters of Job's friends mansplaining to him about God and the world. What's my point? My point is that they started off right, his friends, but they got impatient and they tried to fix everything. And God had to step in. Are you a fixer? I am. I am a fixer. And learning to be less a fixer is one of the big things I am always working on in my spiritual path. What is a fixer? Well, fixers are people who are very good at doing, but not so good at being. Not so good at stillness, silence, listening, etc. Fixers are active people. We are very good at diagnosing the problem and fixing the problem, but we're not so good with the people experiencing the problem. In fact, if they were hard-pressed to respond to you, a fixer would probably say that it's more important to fix the problem people are having rather than to focus on the people themselves. Fixers are, in short, utilitarians who believe that the ends justify the means. Therefore, we assume that if we fix the problem, people will be happy. And even though I'm wired this way in my life, not once have I ever seen it work. Not once. In the long term, anyway. Thinking and living and believing this way is a wonderful way to get short-term results, but it runs out of steam in the marathon. One such example, in the early 2000s, I hired this young kid who had just graduated from film school in Philadelphia to come work for me in New York at our church there. He was young, he was idealistic, he was stubborn, and he was incredibly talented. Everything that I would look for in any filmmaker. So I hired him to be our creative director, and he filmed just about everything, and we'd use the footage for all kinds of things. But after a few years on the job, he and I started to butt heads. One of the drawbacks of this kid's incredible talent was that he had no workflow. His only standard was perfection at the end of the project. And however long it took to attain that perfection is how long all of the other staff had to wait for his part of the project we'd been working on as a team to be accomplished. And it was starting to become an organizational problem in our church staff. However, when his work was done, it was perfect, beautiful, innovative, amazing. Some of the best work I've ever seen. And so, being the organizational genius that I am, I decided to be a fixer about it. This was easy, I thought to myself. I just needed to build a system that we all agreed on, and then everything would even out and get back on track again, on time again. So I built a system that our staff could work through on projects together. And it was flawless. It was an evolving timeline with all of the tasks that everyone was working on church-wide, with daily updates required about where everybody was on their tasks and what they needed from everyone else. What's more, the true genius of this thing that I built was self-governing. And my only responsibility for maintaining the system was to have one staff meeting per week. It ran like a Swiss watch. So we put the system in place, everybody starts working through it, and everything starts to even out and get back to flowing as it should. But now I see that another problem has arisen in response to my fixing of things. Now I was starting to sense a loss of creativity and energy and ownership in our staff. My God, whoever could have caused such a horrible thing? I'll tell you who. It was me. I didn't know it or see it then, but I do now. This happened because I had put a system in place that turned everybody into droids. I had built a beautiful machine, and it worked like magic, but it destroyed people. It destroyed their creativity, their ability to think freely, their ability to innovate and collaborate. I had invented a thing that fixed everything, but it wasn't about the people. I was blind to ever even consider such a system, simply for the sake of productivity. And one day I was sitting in the park and I just heard myself ask myself this question inside. Ryan, when did you get so cold? You used to care about people more than you did productivity. And that voice, if you will, that I heard was right. I had forgotten people for the sake of productivity. And it's one of the seasons of my life that I wish I could do over. Our church, our machine, it was this amazing original thing. We were early adopters and trendsetters and producers on the very edge of the edge all the time. But I had stripped us of our humanity. And this story from the book of Job makes me think about how different my life would be if I had just learned to have stopped my own story where Job's friends should have stopped theirs. They sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. When we are in the presence of those who are suffering, Could we choose to just sit with them? Not to give advice, not to share our opinions, not to lay out a timeline of repair for them, but instead just sit there and be quiet and hold the pain with people. What if that's where the story of Job can end for us in modernity? Because right after this in the story is where it all takes a hard turn into chaos, and eventually God has to show up and get involved because it's such a mess. What if our silence and presence has far more to do with healing than we think it does? That is, I believe, one of the most important lessons we can find in this story. Not just back then for them, but for us now. For us to examine and re-examine. Are we always project-focused? Or are we people-focused first, always? Are we fabulous orators, but horrible listeners? But what if we just tried a different way? To listen more. To take a steady posture of trying to understand rather than trying to be understood. To get really comfortable, maybe even desirous of the space in between the words. To hear a person's heart, even if their mouth is saying something altogether different. Is that something we would be willing to try? I think it could do so much for our world. Not thinking of our world as a system to be fixed, but rather as billions of people with feelings and families and fears and aspirations who simply need someone to give some of their time, to lend an ear, someone who will just sit in the silence with them in the suffering. What if that's far more possible than we think it is? It starts with you. It starts with me. Each of us being willing to give this a try in all of the circles that we occupy in our lives. Maybe it could make for an even better world. I want to invite you now to spend some time in silence and stillness, just thinking about this lesson and what it means for you, individually you, the way that you are wired, the way that you tick. I also want to invite you to receive the Eucharist, communion with us at this time. If you don't have unleavened bread and wine in your presence, wherever you're watching this from, that is totally understandable. Whatever you have available with you is sufficient. Let us take some time now to get still, to get quiet, and to listen to what God, the shaper, the molder, has to speak to each of our hearts about this lesson. Amen.